Welcome everyone to the Foundations of Web Accessibility workshop hosted by the ETS. My name is Marika Cheng. I'm the educational technologist at ETS and am one of the facilitators today. So joining me today is my lovely ETS colleague, Gabrielle. Gabrielle, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Gabrielle Coombs and I am a learning designer with ETS.
Thank you, Gabby. So we will start off with the land acknowledgement. This event is being hosted on the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We would like to extend our invitation to everyone to acknowledge the land upon which you are joining us today in the chat. And if you would like to learn more about First Nations and Indigenous territories, please visit native-land.ca. So for the agenda for today, first we will briefly talk about why accessibility content is important. And then we will also go through the web content accessibility guidelines. And then we will also go into the guidelines interactions, which include alt text, descriptive links, content structuring, and more. If you have any questions during the session, you can type it in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function in the reactions button in your Zoom toolbar. So without further ado, we will talk about why does it matter to have web accessibility.
Cool, thanks Mariko. So when we're thinking about putting on information online, whether that is on a learning management system like Canvas or on a website like WordPress, we want to make sure that the information that we're putting out into the web is going to reach everyone. So specifically thinking about UBC, UBC is a diverse community and everyone here has varying needs. And by making web content accessible, it's really going to benefit everyone, not just people who maybe have a disability. If we think about good accessibility practices, which we're going to go over in a moment, they not only will help maybe somebody who is hard of hearing or deaf, or somebody who has a vision impairment or is blind, but it could also help somebody who speaks English as their second language or as an additional language, and it can help just any person who maybe doesn't want to squint too hard at their screen. By making things accessible, it really will just broadly benefit everyone, and it's great practice to get into the habit of doing as well. So obviously we are joined by a pretty interesting group of folks today. And before we get into talking about web accessibility or good web accessibility practices, we want to have a bit of an idea of what you maybe already know. So we have a Mentimeter question here. I'm going to pop the link to this Menti in the chat. And we'd love to hear from you. What can we do to make web content more accessible? So any ideas that you might have, thinking about how web content might not be accessible to people with a disability, or not be accessible to people who come from non-English speaking backgrounds. Lots of things to think about. So I think Marika will move to our Mentimeter here, and if you've added anything to our conversation that we can have a look and see what ideas are coming through. Okay, cool. So I can see somebody's put colors, text to speech options, amazing. Good contrast, cool. And feel free to add more than one idea if you have more than one. If you're unable to get onto Mentimeter for whatever reason, you're more than welcome to add some of your ideas in the chat as well. Cool. I'll give everyone another moment just in case we have any other ideas. but these are great and things that we're definitely going to be talking about today. Okay, cool. I think, Marika, let's move to the next slide.
Okay, so thanks for the great ideas. And we will now go through the web accessibility guidelines. Also, there are 4 major accessibility principles within the WCAG guidelines. So the first one is perceivable, meaning can all users perceive the information? So information and user interface components must be presented to users in ways that they can perceive. So this means that users must be able to comprehend the information that is presented, and so it shouldn't be invisible to all of their senses. For example, providing alt text for any non-text content so that it can be changed into other forms for people's need. And then the next one would be operable. So user interface components and navigation must be operable. So the interface cannot require interactions that a user cannot perform. So for example, that would be the navigation. So we can provide ways to help users navigate, find content, and determine where they are. So the layout should be kept clear and very simple. The next one would be understandable. So can users understand where the contents are and what to do with them? And so information and the operation of a user interface must be understandable, meaning users must be able to understand the information as well as the operation of the user interface. Last but not least would be robust. So can these contents be used on or across different platforms? So content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted by a wide variety of user agents or platforms, including assistive technologies, meaning even when the technologies evolve, the content should also still remain accessible. So this will make up the POUR principle within the Web Accessibility Guideline. And based on those guidelines, we will go through some of the basics, which include descriptive links, alt text, content structure, using color, captions and transcripts, tables, and accessible documents. So we will go through each of them and give you some examples how we can actually make these become accessible to the reader or user.
Cool. Thanks, Marika. If you can start to click through some of the items on this page, that'd be amazing. Okay, so we're going to start talking about descriptive links. So what do we mean by that? So a plain URL, something that you would see on a website where we're starting with HTTPS or www. They're not going to be screen reader friendly. If you have ever used a screen reader before, and if you haven't, don't worry, we have some examples of what it's like to use a screen reader later in the presentation. But this is going to be quite difficult for somebody using a screen reader. It will be able to read the URL, but it will come through as https://www. That takes a really long time to get to the point. So ideally what you're going to do instead of just copying and pasting a link is going to be embedding that link into a descriptive phrase, which is significantly more accessible for somebody who's using a screen reader and is also a lot easier for you as, for anyone really, who's trying to sort of understand where that link is going to go and what the purpose of the link is. Something to keep in mind, and something that's super duper common, is that often people will use descriptive links with click here or read me. And we want to avoid using those ambiguous phrases. Click here doesn't really tell me where the link is going to go. The information around click here might, but click here doesn't. So it might be more helpful to use a phrase which actually describes the page and where that's going to go. I think as well, there are a couple more points on this slide, Marika, if you can go through. Yeah. Something else to keep in mind too, especially if you're working with WordPress or Canvas, is that people are accessing the net through a variety of different places, not just on a laptop or computer, but often through a tablet or smartphone. So we want to start moving towards removing device-specific vocabulary like the word click. If you're using a smartphone, you're definitely not clicking, you're tapping or pressing. So thinking about the vocabulary you use can be quite helpful as well. So rather than using click, something like follow or use or visit or select, those are sort of platform neutral terms, which again can sort of make things clearer for the user. And finally, if you are linking a document such as a PDF, you should include the file extension at the end in square parentheses. So if we move to the next slide, we'll go through a couple of examples. So this first one, for more information on the topic, click here. That is a big no-no. Again, click here is not really specifically telling me where we're going. I don't know that it's going to be for more information if I just go to that link. So again, click here is really inadvisable. The second one is pretty good. So we have visit the Canvas community forum guide on how to add events to the calendar to learn more. And our link is quite long, but I know exactly where it's going to take me. It's taking me to the Canvas community forum, and what information I'm going to find there is going to be a guide on how to add events to the calendar. You can also see in this sentence that the word visit has been used rather than click. So again, using that sort of platform neutral language. And then finally, this example at the end, fill in the form request for extended access, PDF, is a great example of how to incorporate the file extension. So again, if it was a Word doc, you would put Word or docx or doc or whatever the file extension is. But it's good, again, for folks to know that if, especially if there's somebody who's using a screen reader because of some kind of vision requirement, having that extension can be really helpful in letting them know whether that document is going to be easy for them to read, whether they need to open different software or so on. So this is descriptive links. If we move to the next slide, we're going to ask you a question. I'm going to launch a Zoom poll in a moment, but we have 4 examples of descriptive links. Which one is accessible? So we want the good one. Which one do we want as accessible descriptive link? So I'm going to launch the poll now. On your end, you should see a Zoom box pop up asking you to answer. And we'll have a look and see in a moment. We have 60% participation, amazing. We'll wait a couple more seconds just for anyone else who wants to join to answer. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. And naturally, of course, everyone did a great job. The answer is C. Of course, the first one, it's not terrible, but it's very short. And we're using that word click again. B, just the URL. We don't want to use that. D is click here. We don't want to use that either. So yes, C is absolutely the best option. Cool. So that's descriptive links.
Thanks, Gabby. So we will now move to alt text. So images can be a great way to keep people engaged and to help communicate complex ideas. Image descriptions, also known as alt text, provide a text-based description alternative to an image. So why it is important to have alt text on image? User with visual impairments will have difficulty perceiving the message from the image if there are no image descriptions to explain the content of the image. Alt text is crucial for them because screen readers cannot read images. And in some cases, an image won't show up or it can be downloaded when the user is with poor network connection. Then the alt text can still convey the message to them if it's available. And apart from improving user experience and accessibility, adding image alt text can also ensure the images are optimized for search. So now I'll go through some best practices to write good alt text. First, describe the image based on the page context. Convey the full meaning of the image. For example, an image of the Eiffel Tower will have a different description on a page for architecture than on a page for the history of France. Second, be concise. It is advisable to keep the alt text short at around 125 characters or less. It was previously advised that popular screen readers actually cut alt text off after around 125 characters. If you have complex images like infographics or charts, write a separate caption for the image instead. And also avoid saying image of or picture of because it's already assumed your alt text is referring to an image. So there's no need to specify it, and the screen reader will actually add those phrases automatically. Last but not least, for images that don't represent any relevant content and are only for decorative purposes, identify them as decorative in the alt text. Now I will give you some examples on some alt text. For this bicycle image here, could you please try to give an alt text by typing an alt text that you think is appropriate in the chat, so we can see what you would think would be a good alt text for this image. Like against a brick wall.
No wrong answers, guys. Anything
Yeah.
that you could think of.
Yes, anything.
Yep.
Blue bike against a brick wall. That's good too. Okay, so we'll go through some of the examples here. So it's not a good idea to only have the file name as an alt text because it's not descriptive enough and doesn't provide much context to the reader. And I'll show you what a good alt text would be, which is actually quite similar to what you guys have written in the chat. So a good alt text will be description that allows you to picture the image in your head without seeing it. So for this example, describing the colors of the bike and the background will be very helpful. The next example here is an image of a painting. So as mentioned before, that an image can have different alt text for different contexts to make it more relevant. For example, if this image is shown in a history class, the alt text can focus more on what historical event that it is related to. On the other hand, if it's included in an art class, it would be nice to mention who the artist is, or as well as the way that it is painted. So we will have another poll. So which of the followings is the best alt text for this image? So there are three options. Yeah, sorry. So there are three options. We have A, B, and C. So you can take a look at which alt text you think would be the best alt text for this image.
And again, the poll will pop up in your Zoom application.
We'll wait for a couple more seconds in case if anyone else in the group would like to participate.
Okay, great. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
Okay, that's interesting.
So we have a split.
Yep. Okay, so the first one, no one picked this answer, which is good because the image option A is very concise, but it's too short to give the user much context if that person has never seen or doesn't know what Tower Pizza looks like. So that's good that no one is picking this answer. And the correct answer is actually option B. So it gives you an idea on what it is on the image as it describes the shape and color of tower pizza. And for option C, it is actually a bit too descriptive and provides too much context that could be irrelevant to the message that this image is trying to convey, but it also depends on the context that you're trying to convey. It is also advised to keep the alt text to less than 125 characters. So for longer descriptions, it could be included on the page content or as captions instead. But good try, everyone. Okay.
Great. So let's talk about content structure now that Marika's gone through alt text. So when you're putting content, again, on a web page, but this doesn't just refer to things that are on web pages, it could also be for a Word document or a PDF. It's really important that you are following styled structure conventions. So it's accessible for screen readers. So something to keep in mind is that when content is structured properly and is done correctly, it really facilitates reading, not only for people who are using a screen reader, but for really anyone. Having headings that are clear and easy to identify really does facilitate reading as well. So an important thing to keep in mind is to use the set styles that are available to you on whatever processor you're using. So again, if it's something like Canvas or WordPress, you were able to select things like heading 1, heading 2, paragraph to format your content. And the same thing with if you're using a Word document, you will have the option called text styles. And with text styles, you'll be able to choose heading 1, heading 2, paragraph, and so on. Something to be aware of is that these styling options are not exactly the same as font styling. So please do not exclusively use font styling, like making the font size bigger, making headings bold or italics to indicate that something is a heading rather than using the preset style. The preset styles like heading 1 and heading 2 actually change the code in the backend in HTML, again, which facilitates somebody using a screen reader. And we'll go through what that looks like in a moment. If we move to the next slide, thanks, Marika. We can have a look at an example. Awesome. So you really want to make sure that you're using those ordered heading and paragraph options that are available. Something to keep in mind is that your heading levels cannot be skipped. So if you have any subheadings, it should be the next level down from the previous heading. So we can see here an example of a page. This is from Canvas, where I have my page title, which is the heading, and that's going to be listed as heading 1. Then I have a subheading, primary colors, that's going to be heading 2. Beneath that is my next heading level down, so that would be heading 3. Below that is another subheading, so that's heading 4. And then when I get to the actual content, that will be labeled as a paragraph. So let's have a look at what this actually means. So if you're somebody who's never used a screen reader, this is your experience of what it would be like to use one with a properly formatted page. So if we play this video now, you can hear what you'll be able to hear is that the headings are being listed by the screen reader.
Heading level 2, primary colors. Heading level 3, subtractive model. Heading level 4, red. Information on the color red. Here is some more information about red. Heading level 4, blue. Information.
So you can sort of hear from that example, if you were to close your eyes or if you weren't looking at the screen, you would really be able to tell that, you know, we have these headings. We're talking about primary colors. The next heading level down is the subtractive model of primary colors, and then going through each of those primary colors, and then each paragraph is labeled correctly. So you don't have to be able to see the screen or to watch the screen in order to understand the way that that page is organized. However, if all of that's removed and we move to the next page and we listen, what happens when it's not tagged and structured appropriately?
You are currently on primary colors. Subtractive model, red. Information on the color red. Here is some more information, blue. Information on the color blue. Here is some more information.
So you can sort of see or hear here that there is absolutely no tagging. It's just going through each element individually without letting us know whether it's a heading or a paragraph. So if you're somebody who, again, is unable to see the screen and is using a screen reader, or you're for preference are using a screen reader, Not having those headings is actually it makes things really difficult and doesn't facilitate reading at all. The word read could be in the middle of a paragraph. It could be a new sentence. There's no way for me to know unless things have been correctly formatted. So again, we have a little quiz. This is going to pop up on your Zoom platform again. So we're looking at content structure. We have a page here with some headings. I'm going to launch a poll. Which of the following is incorrectly labeled? So we're not looking for the correct answer. We're looking for what is wrong with this page. What is the incorrect formatting? So I'll give everyone a couple more moments just to finish answering. We have almost everyone. And lots of different answers as well, which is interesting. All right. So I'm going to share the results. And interestingly, the correct answer is D. Heading 4 is incorrect. So heading level 1 is fine. This is the first heading on the page. And then remember that we cannot skip levels. So beneath level 1 is going to be level 2. And then if there is a subheading that is within heading level 2, then it would be heading level 3. But online communications is its own heading. Web conferencing is not a subheading of online communications. It's its own heading. But if we're thinking about web conferencing, Zoom and MS Teams are both types of web conferencing, so they're subheadings beneath web conferencing. So heading 4, Zoom, it shouldn't be heading 4, it should be heading 3, because it's a subheading within web conferencing. So when you're organizing headings, just make sure that you're not going from 2 to 4. It should always be between 2 to 3, and then maybe back to 2, and then 2 to 3, and then to 4, and then maybe back to 3, depending on the situation. But making sure that you're not going from 2 to 4 or from 1 to 3, it should always be in order, and you shouldn't be skipping any levels.
Thanks, Gabby. So after learning about how we can structure our content better, we will now talk about using colors. So colors are often used for emphasize or styling to attract or engage users. And the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines specify a way to calculate the contrast between text color and the background color. The guidelines also designate ratings on color contrast from failing to AAA. And text with poor contrast can be difficult to read for everyone, but especially for people with visual impairments such as color blindness. As you cannot check the exact ratio or contrast rating by just looking at the colors, there are many color contrast tools available online. Such as the contrastchecker.com, that you can simply enter the hex code of the color to get the ratio. And apart from ensuring high contrast between text and its background, you may also consider using grayscale, which eliminates color combination that is hard to distinguish. So people with visual impairments such as color blindness can view the images or text more easily. And using a lot of colors can be visually overwhelming for readers and adding unnecessary cognitive load. And using colors sparingly and mindfully to avoid detracting from the content. Another thing to avoid is to use colors to convey meaning or information on diagrams, maps, charts, or other forms of graphics. Try to use different forms, shapes, or patterns to make the difference more noticeable or easy to distinguish. So here are some examples of how we can use colors in a better way. So here is, we'll start off with a bad example. It is bad because of the choice of color, which is pink and green. So people with red-green color blindness could have difficulty reading this. And the contrast ratio between the two colors is actually not up to the WCAG guideline. And when we used grayscale for these two colors, it actually improves the accessibility by removing the colors that are difficult to distinguish for people with color blindness, even though the contrast is still pretty low. So here is a good example of color combination that is accessible to reader as it has high contrast, and it is also not a common color combination that is difficult for people with color blindness to read. And here is also an example of how we can use patterns to actually convey message rather than just relying on color itself. Okay. So we will now pull up an other poll. And so the question is, which of the following color combinations is inaccessible? So which ones are difficult to read? So we have A for combo A, B for combo B, C for combo C, and then D for combo A and C, and E is all of the above. Okay, I think we have everyone. Awesome. So all of you got the right answer. So it would be combo A and C that are actually difficult to read. So the text and background color of combination A are very light in color, and so the contrast is low. And combination C is a bit more readable, especially with the larger font, but the contrast is still low according to the WCAG standard. And therefore, using tools like Canvas Accessibility Tool or Ally would be useful when using color, as we do not want to encourage people from using colors, but just to be mindful when using them. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Marika. So as well as color, we wanted to talk about the use of captions and transcripts. So much like with other things, images, color, we don't want to say don't use them because they're a really wonderful way to engage people. But be mindful, it can be completely inaccessible if there isn't a text alternative, depending on who your audience is. So thinking about if I have a video in a course, or if I'm sharing a video online, are there captions available? So a really good idea, if you're not comfortable or you haven't found captions before, YouTube has auto captioning for videos, which is really helpful. So when you're using a video, make sure that if it's possible to include captions, and even better would be a transcript as well. So if you're somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing, having that transcript, say, for example, if you've shared a podcast, would be crucial. They would have to have the transcript in order to perceive the information. And similarly, if you're somebody who is remote, who maybe has low bandwidth or poor internet connection, you might not be able to load a video or be able to watch it smoothly. The same thing with a podcast, you might not be able to stream it effectively if you are in an environment where the internet connection isn't very good. So having that transcript is going to be crucial in situations like that. So keep in mind, if you're trying to share information with people who are in remote communities, that having text alternatives is really important. Again, as I said, for a podcast, it's really crucial. But another thing as well is that it's not just going to help people who are in remote areas or who have disabilities, but it could also help people who are learning English or people for whom English is an additional language. Again, English is an interesting and weird language in a lot of ways. People have different accents, and it can be really difficult if you're a language learner to consume everything that is available in English. So having those captions or transcripts is really helpful. So if we move to the next slide, we have a couple of tips. So if you are at UBC, you may have heard, or you hopefully have heard of Kaltura. This is a video hosting site that is available to staff, faculty, and students at UBC. And one of the cool things about Kaltura is that you can order machine-generated captions for free. So if you upload any video to Kaltura, and Marika, I will put a link in the chat in a moment for Kaltura, you have the option of ordering captions. I would say that they're pretty accurate. In my experience, I would say that they're about 95% accurate. You might need to go through and double check the typos or the small incorrectly generated captions, but broadly speaking, they're pretty good. The nice thing about getting these machine generated captions from Kaltura is that you can also then view them as a transcript. So if you have your video, you have the captions embedded on top, and then you can also copy and paste that transcript and put it beneath the video in an accordion, or you could just put it on the page as well. And then again, if you're in a bit of a bind, and you have a video that you're planning to share, if it's on YouTube, YouTube does have auto captioning. It is the CC button that you will see on YouTube that will provide captions. Again, these tend to be less accurate, I would say, than the ones on Kaltura, but it is an option and is really helpful. So having that as something available is a good thing for sure. And I will quickly find that link for Kaltura. It's learning.video.ubc.ca. I'll pop it in the chat. And so if you're interested in exploring Kaltura as a place for you to host videos, just knowing that it does have that captioning option might be really useful.
Thanks, Gabby. So now we'll move on to using tables. Information can be presented in a very organized way visually when using a table, but when it is read out by a screen reader, it will actually sound like this.
Table with 5 columns and 4 rows. Subject, session, days, time, mode of delivery. East 335, Mon, Wed, 1330 1500 hours, in person, LLED 33430, Wed, 10 o'clock 11 o'clock, in person, Kin 427002, Tuesday, 10:30 12 o'clock, online.
Okay, so can anyone catch the information on which day of the week that Kin class is being offered? Okay, so so this is actually the table that the screen reader just read out. So here are some tips for you to create a more accessible table. So so first of all is to include a header. Simple data tables can easily be read by screen readers if they have the appropriate tag and attribute to identify which cells are the row and column headers. So for example of this table here, so you will have to tag the subject, session, days, time, and mode of delivery as the header. And second of all, is to avoid merged cells, split cells, or blank cells. It is important to remember that screen reader actually read the tables linearly. So merged cells, split cells, or blank cells will make it very difficult, if not impossible, for screen readers to read the information in the table aloud in a way that makes sense. As you have heard what a screen reader will actually have to go through on a simple structured table, avoid complex structure like nesting tables inside of tables, as that would make the reader difficult or impossible to understand the context. And also try to keep the table short, as having too many rows and columns will make it more challenging for the reader to find the information even with the appropriate text. And also to add alt text or caption. It can be time-consuming to read a table with a screen reader, so use alt text to add a short summary or captions of the information provided in the table, so the screen reader users can decide if they want to read the entire table. Last but not least, do not use screenshots of table. build a table in your document, email, or website rather than just including a screenshot because a screen reader cannot read an image. So a person using a screen reader won't know what data is contained in the screenshot of the table. Okay. So tables are also commonly used for page layout to overcome the limitations in visual presentation and layout using HTML. But now with CSS, which is the cascading style sheet, there is actually much more flexibility in controlling the page layout. So it is best to not use tables for design layout of the page. And here is an example using a table for page layout. So for visual users, it will read basement toilets must flush up. And however, this table, so this image is actually made of a table with 4 columns and 3 rows. And since the screen reader reads the table linearly, this is what the screen reader will be reading out. So it will make no sense to the people with visual impairment who relies on the screen reader. So let's take a look.
Basement up, toilets flush must.
Yeah, so it will actually make no sense to people with visual impairment who relies on screen reader. Okay. Okay, so now we will have another poll. So the question is, what makes this table inaccessible? So A would be merged cells, B blank cells, C split cells, D all of the above, E none of the above.
Okay, I think everyone's answered.
Yes. Okay, so let's see. Okay, majority of you got it right. So it's actually all of the above. So merged cells, blank cells, and split cells will make it difficult for a screen reader to read because the screen reader actually reads linearly. So let's say it will start from this blank cell here and then read the row here, name, room, phone number. So if it's already with the blank cells, the user won't be able to know what this column represent. And then also if with the merged cells, it would be difficult for user to know where they are on the table because they will just skip from the phone number of the second row, then to the third row directly to the name. So all of these merged cells, blank cells, and split cells will make user difficult to understand the context of the table. So try to avoid them when creating table. That will make your table more accessible. Okay.
Thanks, Mariko. I think this is our last topic, but we're going to talk briefly about accessible documents. So obviously online we share documents all the time. You might be emailing a Word document to a friend or putting a PDF on your web page. So again, when you're sharing a document, keep in mind that some formats are going to be more accessible than others. So a scanned document, a page from a textbook, for example, that you have used a scanner for to turn into a PDF, that is going to unfortunately be unusable for someone with a screen reader. They often will also have really poor readability, just because, again, scanners are imperfect and often the quality of the actual scan might make readability really difficult. So something to keep in mind is that if you are using something that is a scanned page, that they are OCR'd, which if you don't know what that means, that's okay. OCR stands for optical character recognition. So that means that the individual characters or letters or numbers that are on the page have been recognized so that a screen reader is able to read it, so that you can highlight the text using a cursor or your finger if you're using a tablet or smartphone. So if something has gone through the OCR process, it will be a lot more readable than something that hasn't. The other thing too is that generally speaking, PDFs are a bit finicky. It's pretty common for PDFs to be inaccessible because oftentimes PDFs will be created out of images. So again, if you've made that scan using a scanner from a physical page, that's really creating an image, which again, as Marika had talked about earlier, is going to not be accessible to someone using a screen reader. They would need alt text. So if you have an image that is a PDF or a PDF that's an image, keep in mind that this is probably not going to be very accessible. If you do have a PDF that's a bit inaccessible, they are also a bit difficult to make accessible. PDFs accessibility is something that you definitely can work with, but it is complicated and requires a complex process of tagging and organizing the reading order of the page and adding a lot of like other elements that you might not have to do if you weren't to use that PDF in the first place. So that's not to say don't use PDFs, just be mindful that often they can be inaccessible and that you might have to go to some extra lengths to make a PDF accessible if it isn't. The alternative that we're going to suggest is that you often use a Word document to make a file accessible, and then you can turn it into an accessible PDF. So often if you have a Word doc, if you choose to save it as a PDF, if you are using Microsoft Word, you will have an option that says create accessible PDF. And that means that it will go through that optical character recognition. It will tag the reading order correctly. And especially if you've used correct styling in your Word doc, using those heading styles and adding alt text already, which is very easy to do using Microsoft Word, the PDF at the end will be significantly more accessible than if you were to just save it without going through those processes. So if we move to the next slide, some things to keep in mind, much like if you're putting anything on the net, if you're making an accessible document, keep in mind, use descriptive links, add alt text to your visuals. Word will absolutely let you know to do this. I think in some cases it actually automatically generates alt text. I know with PowerPoint it definitely does. And in my experience using Word, often it will generate some alt text. So that's kind of cool. Again, labeling content appropriately with the right heading structure, using color mindfully, using simple tables, and using any built-in accessibility tools that are available. If you are, again, at UBC and you are staff and faculty, you do have access to the Adobe Creative Suite, which includes the full version of Adobe Acrobat Pro, the PDF reader and builder. And so if you are ever interested in trying to make an inaccessible PDF accessible, you can always use the full version of Acrobat Pro to do an accessibility check, tag the document correctly, and then eventually make it more accessible.
Hey, thanks, Gabby. So after going through all the tips and tricks of how to make web more accessibility and how to create more accessible documents, tables, the overview for this workshop is that to use good accessibility practice would actually benefits everyone, not just the visually impaired people, not just the hearing deaf people, but it's actually benefits to everyone. And ETS, which is our team, will always be here for any questions that you have on web accessibility. So you can always email us or come to our workshops, or also make an appointment for a one-on-one consultation. So we are always here for you. And we would really appreciate if you can actually fill in a survey for us to let us know how we did on this workshop, whether you find it helpful or maybe what you would like to learn more. from us. So we would really appreciate you to take a few moments to complete the survey right now. So the link would also be in the chat.
Yeah.
If you can click on it.
Yeah.
And we will wait for a couple minutes for you to complete the survey. And then we will go into Q&A after. So if you don't have any further questions, we will end our workshop here. But feel free, if you think of any questions after this workshop, you can always contact us through our email, and which is I'm going to show you here. So you can connect with us through Twitter. You can subscribe to our mailing list and also book a one-on-one consultation with us. And here is our ETS website, ets.educ.ubc.ca. So you can find a lot of information there. And here's our email address, ets.educ@ubc.ca. So welcome to email us anytime if you have any questions. So it's great to have everyone here. So if you don't have any further questions, we will end this workshop here. Good to see you guys.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.